almost fainted. These people in uniform.
I don't know anything about that. If there are some entities who are doing it, to be frank, I don't know.
They are worrying me.
I'll tell you something now.
Yeah. I'm allergic.
There are goose, but the waves not there. It is very hot. If you go, you got problem.
I will be hot.
Abortion as her last resort.
Doc, when
the abortion turned rape. The sex, the sleaze, and the drugs. From the stables of Tiger IPI comes another thrilling and captivating episode of Wild Ghana. How wild could we be?
On many occasions, when I wanted to pay the bill, the way they would...
To the prophecy, the nearness of Christ is near, so we should prepare. They will beat you, they will insult you, they will slap you. They use cane and point to everybody which wizard.
We acknowledge the fact that we have a freedom to practice our religion. This is totally unacceptable.
The DVDs for Anansa's undercover works over the years are now available in selected shops. Grab your copy now.
Produce your peppers. Produce your peppers.
Officer, I'm not going to how many people so join your concert when you were comfort? We are comfort, we trade any more video. There be. It's a people. Since people are going to join them, also some people. I did it so I go channel. I jam a comfort dear. Who are comfort dear. To Bushman now. To Bushman. Yeah. Comfort. The daily. But the woman don't think so. Which I mean, you can tell me to me, what do you want to tell me? Foolish man. Shut up! Babu's your office. Yes, my main office. Name, I'm going to prepare you. But you won't party on the question. Sir, we be over. Produce your way or VAT certificate, whatever. Yes. Japacho, well, a comfort you all need. You need people here. Would this be just so now so you come forward? Okay. Bring it down. Bring it down. Bring it down. Come on. Let me help you. Bring it down. Papa, they were so move. Bring it down. Bring it down. Down. Let me help you. They were so move, Papa. Come on. And then they will. You're so much good. What can I tell you? Your first thing. Yeah. Anas! Who the officer camera would never bother solo. Oh, David, Anas, no. David Usia. David Unia. Oh, maybe she camera, a dear camera. Anas! Look, you are Anas, eh? Anas! Put off your camera, put off your camera. And yes, Anas, Mamiko. Anas, over what about you to go for picture. David. If you don't come and show. She didn't. Anas. So you are native doctor Anas, not journalist Anas. You are very, very stupid. Conference. Oh, come here. Come here. You are very stupid. Come here. You are an idiot. Look, wait. Go. Come here. Go. You are very stupid. Go. You have to attend it. Go.
I am happy to be here today to talk to you about my kind of journalism, undercover journalism. My journey started 14 years ago.
Anas Aramayao Anas has distinguished himself as the multiple international award-winning Ghanaian journalist. Yet, he often escapes this label of the traditional journalist. He calls it the steel culture journalism, one based on hardcore evidence that can be used to name, shame, and jail the villains in his stories. In 2010, The Atlantic Monthly voted him one of its 19 brave thinkers alongside British Prime Minister David Cameron, humanitarian Sakena Yakubi, and businessman Tom Sullivan. They were the people risking their reputations, fortunes, and lives in pursuit of big ideas.
The Atlantic magazine is a leading light as far as the celebration of excellence is concerned in the world. And for more than 150 years, it has been publishing extraordinary barrier-breaking, line-crossing achievements for people from all walks of life, from science, from technology, from politics, from governance, journalism, etc. And in 2009, we all know how he made a lot of news by picking 27 people, outstanding personalities. Mark Zuckerberg, who is now 27 years old, with his Facebook. We know about Steve Jobs and what he's done with Apple. We know about Barack Obama, who by so many ways is the first African-American, if you like, or black man to become president of the United States of America. And quite a number of people. And so in 2010, they also decided to list a number of people. This time they didn't get 27, they got 19. And Anas Aramayao Anas was mentioned as one of them. And this idea that we should not gloss over is the fact that it doesn't just list people who do well in their chosen areas of endeavor, but it's people who do things differently and still manage to set a standard. And so that is how big, the names that we have mentioned, That's how big the Atlantic magazine is. And for you to recognize a Ghanaian from far away, it means that the person must have done something that affects the whole world.
In the Atlantic Monthly, he was labeled a smuggler, forger, writer, and spy. But long before then, he was the young boy poring over stacks of books in the Dubois Library in Ghana, seeking ways in which he could also contribute to making this world a better place.
One thing alone I charge you, as you live, believe in life. Always, human beings will live and progress to greater, broader, and fuller life. The only possible death is to lose belief in this truth, simply because the great end comes slowly, because time is long.
He was the boy with a dream. On his first visit to sub-Saharan Africa, the 44th U.S. President Barack Obama singled Anas out in his policy statement with a high commendation for his work as a journalist.
We see that spirit in courageous journalists like Anas, Anas, who risked his life to report the truth.
When Obama mentioned my name in his maiden African speech, when your name is mentioned in all those avenues, it should not induce in you a sense of complacency. It should rather spare you. For me, whenever I hear those mentions, it sends one message that people really understand what is happening or what time it is in Ghana. And indeed, people expect to see more. So it's a double-edged sword that yes, it's fine to have your name mentioned. You should know that you have to serve society in a much better way than you have. The more your name is mentioned, the more society expects more from you. It is not about climbing to the top, but it's about how to sustain.
Just as it did not start there, it has also continued since. The Elders, an independent group of eminent global leaders brought together by Nelson Mandela, who offer their group influence and experience to promote peace building, help address major causes of human suffering, and promote the shared interests of humanity, had already in a ceremony in Paris in 2008 presented the Every Human Has Rights Awards for his contribution in human rights.
There's a certain reportage that transcends, that goes beyond. Today in Ghana, over a dozen girls are at home with their families because of a certain courage displayed by two individuals, two Ghanaian journalists. The prize for Best Investigative and Most Courageous Journalism goes to Mary Fianco Akufo and Anas Arameyao Anas with the Crusading Guide in Ghana.
Arameyao and Akufo's investigation uncovers and breaks an international human trafficking syndicate.
First of all, I want to thank the Crusading Guide editor, Mr. Kwekubak. I want to dedicate this award to him. Anas Arameyao Anas couldn't be here because of some strange reasons. All I want to say is thank you very much for this. Thank you.
Other presidents, including the Indian Prime Minister, the President of Ghana, and other statesmen have recognized Anas's works.
I was waiting for the Anas video to be shown, and that confirmed the reports that I've been having all along.
We are all aware that in Ghana, there are journalists and media houses who engage in yellow journalism. The pen is still mightier than the sword or the gun. We need well-educated journalists with analytical minds such as Kweku Baku Jr. and with investigative minds like Anas Arameyao Anas, both of whom, interestingly, happen to be students of law.
But long before then, he was adjudged Ghana's Journalist of the Year. In the same year, he took the Best Investigative Journalist in Ghana, making him the only journalist to win it thrice in a row.
The GJ appreciated it, and we showed that appreciation by giving him an honorary award. That is very uncommon for his age and the number of years he's practiced
we don't easily give away honorary awards. And the main thing behind was that at a point he himself said, look, I have won Investigative Journalist of the Year 3 times in succession. I've won the Journalist of the Year. I think that others need to be recognized and motivated.
In 2004, Anas had just won the Catholic World Media Awards Excellence in International Journalism Award, which was to be presented to him in Bangkok, Thailand. While in Bangkok, he came across a juicy story which his journalistic instincts could not resist.
I had been invited to Bangkok to receive an international award, and it was such a grandiose occasion. The award was actually Excellence in International Journalism. But yes, for 3 days I had a good time. Being the journalist that I am, after 3 days you ask yourself, what next? So I started looking around and I wanted to catch a glimpse of some Africans around. And of course, if you're a proper African, you know that the first thing to ask of whenever you travel at such a long distance is to ask of Nigerians. So I did ask of my brothers in Nigeria. And I was taken to a Nigerian shop. I asked them, where can I locate my fellow Ghanaians? And they said, well, it's just 2 buildings behind you. And they took me. Interestingly, when I got there, they were all in morning clothes. So I joined them and decided to engage in the conversation. But what was clear was that all of them were going for a funeral. So I asked them, what sort of funeral are you going to? Then the lady I spoke to said, oh, you don't know what is happening. Why? Did you just arrive? Don't you know that Enoch is dead and we are burying Enoch today? And I said, wait a minute, who is Enoch? I said, oh, Enoch is one of our colleagues at the Bangkok Hilton prisons, and he died there. I got a bit curious. I asked, how did Enoch die? They said Enoch died of fork wounds. Then I'm like, what do you mean? He said, yes, Enoch was eating, and then a prison warden got angry that he was messing up the place, and then he took the fork that he was eating with, and then he stabbed him in the rib, and then he died. I was shocked, and I knew that I had to do something about the situation.
The Bangkok story was one of the best that he ever did, because of the courage that went with it, the daredevil nature, the risks. It was the high risk adventure, and there were times that I thought that perhaps if something had gone wrong, I would have been blamed for that, particularly in a foreign territory, unfamiliar territory. But that again showed the spirit of the man we call Anas. So it was good for legislative attention also to be attracted to that. It was a fantastic piece of investigative journalism in the interest of humanity.
Back in Ghana, Anas went undercover and got a job as a menial worker at Eurofood, a biscuit and confectionery manufacturing factory. Eurofood was using expired and maggot-infested flour to produce biscuits for the consumption of the public in Ghana and some parts of Africa. His expose rocked the West African sub-region.
For the first time, a news crew was right in the thick of things when a police operation got underway. 2 busloads of police officers and several other cars filled with CID and FDB personnel stormed the premises of Eurofoods Limited off the Spintex Road. The Ghanaian workers and Lebanese managers were stunned and confused. However, the mole in their midst happened to be none other than an award-winning investigative journalist who had worked undercover at the factory for weeks, Anas Aremeyao of the Crusading Guide. A search of the premises revealed a disconcerting fact. Most of the sacks of flour were expired, nearing expiry, or at the date of expiry. The undercover reporter who leaked the story to GTV revealed that the expired flour made the biscuits brittle, so the company bought fresh flour and mixed it with the old one. And according to experts, eating expired products can be harmful to one's health. And that is only half of the story. Worse is the fact that weevils and maggots had made their homes in the expired flour. It is now up to the Food and Drugs Board and Ghana Standards Board to live up to their responsibility to ensure the safety of the Ghanaian food products.
By this time, the name Anas Aremeyao Anas was gradually becoming synonymous to undercover investigative journalism, one area of journalism which many Ghanaians were seeing for the first time on the media landscape.
Anas merely is taking advantage of our democracy, our constitution, chapter 12 to be precise, and giving a new lease to investigative journalism.
There are people, even professional journalists, some seasoned ones, who have dared written articles questioning the ethics of what he does and suggesting that it is not journalism. But I think sometimes those things smack of envy and jealousy, and perhaps also, to be fair, perhaps ignorance. Because you see, in our own code of ethics, in terms of Ghanaian journalism, and I believe it's universal, we are allowed, in some circumstances, relative to public order, public health, public security, those things, to apply subterfuge, use undercover means to unmask people who are on the verge of committing crime or are in the act of committing crime. Subversion, treason, murder, and all those things, plotting it. And you cannot just go and ask those people questions on the normal format. So the code of ethics allow us to do that. So what Anas has done is to perfect it and institutionalize it and to develop a certain methodology that perhaps is virtually an Anas format, in my candid opinion, and pursue it with success, you know, with appropriate professionalism and excellence.
Did it happen by chance? Some 2 decades ago, young Anas Aremeyao Anas was a lad growing up in the 37 military barracks, where discipline was the order of the day. There, he recalls how watching the strict lifestyle of military officers sparked in him a dream to inject excellence into his life's work. One would have expected Anas to take up after his dad, a military officer. But young Anas had other plans. After his SSSCE at Christian Methodist Secondary School in Accra, an interest in the arts and language led him to the Ghana Institute of Journalism, where he enrolled to pursue a career in journalism. Prior to this moment, Anas had also developed an interest in acting. This led to a stage act in a play directed by the popular Ghanaian film producer Kwao Ansah. While at the Ghana Institute of Journalism, Anas gained admission into the University of Ghana to study political science at the undergraduate level. At the University of Ghana, Anas became a member of the Commonwealth Hall. There, he made lifelong friends.
He then was a practicing journalist with the Crusading Guard newspaper. And then he was a student. By then, he had already started doing his investigative journalism. So I was like, how is this gentleman able to mix all this and still come out? And he had very good grades as well. So it got me curious. I got attracted, friendly with him, and we grew from there. And in Commonwealth Hall, there's this camaraderie that comes right from the word go. Because when you come through the hall first year, there's this program where immediately you come into the hall, you are all freshers, you go through the initiation rite of the hall, which is called pounding. And a few would escape the net, but most of us, including Anas, had some very good pounding, because you can only call yourself a true vandal and the son of Adabakus when you have gone through that initiation rite.
By his second year in the University of Ghana, Anas graduated from the Ghana Institute of Journalism with a diploma in communication studies. With very attractive options of working in some state-owned media or furthering his education outside the country, Anas decided to work with the Crusading Guide, an independent newspaper in Accra. The editor of the paper, Kwaku Bako Jr., had just returned from jail.
I recall the early days when Anas joined the then Crusading Guide. This was late 1997, early 98. He came on board as an intern, you know. That was his own choice. He decided, I'm sure he had tracked and monitored the media landscape. And because of his bent towards investigative journalism, some of which we had done, particularly with some major items, he decided to come on board. Young, unassuming, you know, innocent man. And I thank God I gave him the opportunity.
When Anas joined us, I personally was in charge of him. I was supervising his work and other things. And I could see that he was portraying certain traits of investigative journalism because he didn't like going for assignments as other journalists would do. He always wanted to do something different.
Unlike other journalists in the newsroom, Anas did not get opportunities to go on official assignments. He had to take personal initiatives by going out to identify and pursue stories in order to meet his daily quota of stories. It was on one of these personal missions that he did a story that would become a reference point in his development as an undercover journalist. It was the Nkatie burger story.
Most of these hawkers do not have license to sell. So once in a while they are picked on by the enforcers who want to clean the street of hawkers selling at unauthorized places. And I felt that Anas, not being used to hawking, wouldn't know the nuances, the signal that they are coming. And in case there was such a raid, the others will vanish. He'd be caught standing, he would have been injured. And I felt that it was quite a bold thing that he did. It wasn't necessary for him to have done it. So at the News File program over 10 years ago, they had published the story inside, and I picked it, and I felt that that would mark the beginning of a great investigative journalist. And I'm happy I've not been proven wrong. He's made me proud.
From those humble beginnings, Anas rose from the obscurity of the newsroom to hold key positions as a lead reporter, editor, and a global phenomenon. He is the longest-serving head of the new Crusading Guide's investigative unit. As head of investigations, Anas championed many groundbreaking investigative journalism works which have helped consolidate his place as a leader in undercover investigative journalism. Over the years, he has been at his best, investigating and breaking stories with hardcore evidence which have held the Ghanaian public spellbound. In the year 2007, while heading the new Crusading Guide's Special Investigative Journalism team, Anas decided to embark on a mission dubbed the Trafficking Project. The project was aimed at tackling human trafficking, one of the largest human rights violations of our time. It works by exposing trafficking networks, child prostitution rings, and child traffickers, a global phenomenon which was becoming a pandemic across the West African sub-region.
Human trafficking is a hidden crime. And therefore, if you don't do much undercover, it's very difficult even to get evidence. So I think it's a good thing that he has been doing. But day in and day out, we work together, and almost all the information that he has brought, after doing all the background check and everything, we see that they are positive. And that's why we always support him when he comes with any information. The collaboration between the anti-human trafficking unit and his group, it's so perfect, and we will continue to collaborate and network with him.
Since the project's establishment, the Trafficking Project has had astounding success due to the leadership, commitment, and bravery of Anas. His determination and innovation in the field of investigative journalism has led to global recognition. He has received a number of national and international awards.
The 2008 prize for a local journalist is awarded to Anas Armiao Anas.
In 2008, the U.S. Department of State featured Anas prominently in its Trafficking in Persons report as a hero working to end modern-day slavery. He was given the State Department's prestigious Hero Award.
It's a warm Friday, and from us here in the studio, we say good afternoon and welcome to our lunchtime news at 1. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, modern-day slave master at Bimbila in the Nanumba districts of the northern region is now in police grips. According to crusading guides Anas Arimiyao Anas, who monitor the children, they milked cows in the morning before sending them to graze. From there, Alpha Al-Hassan sends them into the streets of Bimbila to beg for alms or work on his farm. Imam Alpha also hires these children out as farm laborers, where they toil under the scorching sun while he sits around cross-legged facing the Kaaba and telling his beads. After all, he's a slave master enjoying the fruits of the children's labor.
The Anti-Human Trafficking Unit of the Ghana Police called for a dossier from the trafficking report to help him in the prosecution of the slave master. The 15 rescued children were taken to a safe shelter. They were given medical checkups and taken to Quranic school so that they could continue their education. They have been reunited with their parents while the slave master is still facing prosecution. Anas, who obtained a job as a janitor in a brothel, videotaped girls between the ages of about 11 and 15 years engaged in child prostitution. This resulted in the rescue of 60 girls and a face-off with the government on their failure to provide care to these children subsequently. The Chinese Sex Mafia, a story which came to the notice of the world on February 14, 2009, was the result of over 7 months of undercover work by Anas. This story brought to the fore evidence that some shrewd foreign businessmen were taking advantage of the porous nature of African borders, the general insecurity and endemic poverty across the African continent to perpetrate crimes against humanity. Here, the rich engage in the sale of poor and vulnerable human beings for sexual exploitation. After obtaining evidence using a hidden camera to capture scenes of the sexual exploitation and molestation of the girls by the trafficker, the Ghana police carried out a successful raid in the trafficker's haven. 3 traffickers were arrested and 7 Chinese women rescued from a brothel in La, a suburb of Accra, Ghana. The traffickers were sentenced a total of 42 years. There have been a series of news reports by the international media, particularly the BBC and other local media within the sub-region, on some of these cases that have been carried out by the trafficking project. In the last Kurt Schork Awards at the Frontline Club in London, the project's lead investigative reporter beat other reporters around the world with their entries selected by a panel of international judges.
The 2008 prize for a local journalist is awarded to Anas Arimiyao Anas. So if you'd like to come up with this. We're never going to get the order of these presentations right, but it's okay. Anas is an investigative reporter with an independent Ghanaian newspaper called The Crusading Guide. He was responsible for exposing 2 major human trafficking rings in Accra. Again, I'd commend you to read those stories. He worked at great personal risk undercover for 8 months, revealing amongst other things the identities of immigration officials who were accepting bribes at the airport in return for overlooking fake visas and fake passports. And as a result of those undercover investigations and his collaboration with law enforcement officials, NGOs and other journalists, 17 Nigerian trafficking victims were rescued. And following that success, Anas posed as a janitor in a brothel, made his excuses and left, where he collected evidence of a second ring trafficking children for prostitution. And his efforts then again guided police in planning and executing a raid to rescue those children. The judges commended his work, saying his expose of a complex, cross-border human trafficking syndicate was fearless and compelling. It was, they said, a rich example of journalism that has brought about real change for the better.
Although he remains a very committed member of the Crusading Guide, now the new Crusading Guide newspaper, Anas's investigative services were being sought by people and even organizations to help them. As a result, he established a private investigative firm, Tiger Eye Private Investigations. This gave him a broader perspective within which to apply his investigative skills. Tiger Eye PI works on private investigations and on investigative stories which are of national interest. A mutual relationship has now been built between the New Crusading Guide and Tiger Eye for all documentaries from Tiger Eye to be published in feature formats by the New Crusading Guide, of which Anas has risen to become co-publisher. Even as the trafficking project kept gathering steam and zeal, Anas, noted for his ability to multitask and experiment, hopped on to another area in his fight for a measure of social justice. It was the anti-corruption project. That, however, came as a turning point that would define Anas's career in significant ways. First, as his major transition to documentary filmmaking and a build-up on the pioneering acts of investigative journalism in Ghana. Although the next batch of stories were to be carried in print by the New Crusading Guide, Anas would piece together evidence adduced from investigations into a documentary film on each occasion. It started off with an expose into smuggling across the western borders of Ghana. Amongst other things, Anas and his Tiger Eye team of investigators gathered hardcore evidence of how business people teamed up with customs officers to dupe the sales of taxes and revenue. That was to be the first of many other works bordering on corruption and massive revenue losses to the good people of Ghana, works that would trigger recouping of massive revenue to the state. The social justice and human rights abuse component would not be left on the back burner. The exact reason for which Anas and the Tiger Eye team released 2 human rights stories laced with anti-corruption themes. In December 2009 came Madhouse, in which Anas disguised himself first as a taxi driver and later got himself admitted as a patient in the psychiatric hospital. As a taxi driver, he uncovered cases of hospital staff selling food supplies meant for inmates to outsiders. Inside the hospital as a patient, Anas exposed human rights abuse of inmates and the sale of narcotic drugs to patients by some nurses. The president at the time, John Evans Adam Mills, paid a visit to the facility and called for drastic improvements in the general condition of patients and the hospital.
My emphasis is going to be on the prevention, ensuring that people don't bring in, these drugs.
Parliament also passed the Mental Health Bill to ensure the delivery of better health care services to patients in there. Just as the dust from Madhouse was about settling, Anas released The Orphan's Home of Hell, an extensive expose into injustices and human rights abuse of kids supposed to be under the care of surrogate parents. These kids were being beaten, maltreated, and neglected, with some left to die in the process. Anas's disguise this time was as a pastor and later as a female philanthropist from Mali. But again, the anti-corruption component surfaced, with nannies misapplying monies that had been donated to the kids, the burning of donated items, and nannies appropriating donated items to themselves and their children. Meanwhile, hardcore corruption in a documentary similar to Underworld Smugglers came in between Madhouse and Orphan's Home of Hell. It was a cocoa smuggling piece dubbed In the Interest of the State. Here were people who were busily selling Ghana's revered cash crop and export product, cocoa, to people outside of the country. And for the better part of time, they did so to fill their own pockets at the expense of the public coffers and the poor farmer. Posing as a businessman, Anas and the team managed to produce hardcore evidence of customs, police, and national security officials who were busily making money through the illegal trade. Again, the then president, John Evans Adam Mills, went to SEPS.
If I ever doubted that some of the people in SEPS were really working against the economy, what I saw with my own eyes and heard with my ears convinced me beyond any reasonable doubt that if this is a person who has sworn to work in the interest of our nation, I'm saying, my brothers and sisters, this is the time for introspection.
After that came Enemies of the Nation, an expose of high-level corruption at the Tema Harbor. Mills went to the Tema Harbor once more to express his unreserved sentiments.
You are in charge of revenue. Every day we hear reports about malpractices People collecting bribes with careless abandon. People who think that they are entitled to take bribes. The Anas video confirmed the fears I've had for quite some time.
Anas has been doing a lot of undercover work on the international front with networks such as BBC, CBS, CNN, and many others. In 2011, Anas collaborated with Insight News Television, a documentary production company in London, to launch Africa Investigates. Africa Investigates sought to empower African journalists to investigate and tell their own stories. It succeeded with the production of 8 documentary films across Africa, commissioned by Al Jazeera English. Anas played key roles in most of the documentary films. What priced the story was a compilation of thoughts of investigative journalists like Anas and his breed across the continent faced in the line of risking their lives to report the truth. Soria Samura, Stanley Kwenda, and a female investigator and Anas all had stories to tell. In Timber, Sierra Leone, in the corridors of power in faraway Sierra Leone, Anas met the vice president of the country for business. Together with his friend Bilal, they exposed high-ranking state officials who were flouting state rules with regards to logging of timber. While the forests got depleted each second, some men were busily gathering money that would not pass if Anas was present. No, never.
In this episode of Africa Investigates, renowned Ghanaian journalist Anas Arameo Anas goes undercover to expose a multi-million-dollar scam. After investors seeking his country's most famous export discover to their cost that not everything which glitters is gold.
In Fool's Gold, Anas, together with a Jordanian friend Bilal, busted a gold scam ring, one of many that had been tarnishing the image of Ghana. Another documentary in the series was Ghana's Gold. Here, Anas went to illegal gold mining sites. He went as far as working in a Galamsey mine and exposed the difficulties that people faced as a result of illegal mining and the human cost thereof. For Spell of the Albino, Anas made a trip to Tanzania to expose witch doctors there, whose actions were threatening the lives of albinos, whose body parts were being used for magic potions.
Take it. Say you want a life albino, take it. Take. Why? What are you? Take it. Take the albino arm. Take it. Why are you afraid?
It will not only be just this one. We are going round picking them one by one to ensure that we put them behind bars. The atrocities that they are perpetrating towards albinos are nothing but stupid. They have to stay in prison and keep the society safe. Mr. Anas, thank you. Thank you too.
The president's assignment was hinged on a critical national utility that had for years troubled individuals, households, and several small businesses. While the Electricity Company of Ghana, ECG, always asked that the citizenry pays more for the utility, several multinational companies were wallowing in monstrous debts. As if that was not enough, there was blatant stealing and selling of meters that were themselves problematic, leaving the average customer frustrated. Anas and the Tiger Eye team traced the history of Ghana's power from the pre-colonial days through the decades to the rot that has taken over the facility. For the first time, the team also told the story of how board members of the ECG were also busily taking fat sums of money. The ECG has since gone on to recoup a large chunk of the monies owed her by companies and several households that feared that their names would be mentioned sooner or later. Certainly an exercise in the interest of the nation to flush out the enemies of the nation. In the end, a worthy exercise and a presidential assignment delivered. Dawns of the Forest was to be a follow-up from In the Interest of the State, when cocoa smuggling was put in the national spotlight. That mission was aimed at the security officials. This one was to put the poor farmers' plight out. After several tailing and tracking operations, the team headed by Anas managed to bust a whole syndicate involved in stealing and selling of insecticides and other items, meant to be sold at a highly subsidized fee to farmers, sometimes for free. The Buffalo Unit commander in the region and his team were on hand to help us arrest all those caught on secret camera involved in stealing of items meant for farmers. Deadly Gold followed immediately after Dawns of the Forest. This time, Anas made his way into the mining sector of Ghana at a time when the issue was high on the national agenda. Here, Anas took several roles to get the story told exhaustively. At one point, he was a laborer, then a local chief, and then a businessman. As a laborer, Anas focused on the activities of local miners, known as galamsey operators, whose actions threatened their own lives and that of others. Destroyed farmlands, flooding, and polluted water bodies were some of the high prices locals had to pay. Next was the manner in which, beyond locals, foreigners were also involved in small-scale mining activities. But before wrapping up the investigation, Anas posed again as a laborer to some Chinese miners, and later came through as a local chief with land to lease for galamsey. His stint as a businessman was to measure the level of police complicity, and there again he got results that showed that security men were also a part of the reason behind the thriving illegality called galamsey. When Multi-TV decided to launch their Joy News channel, they approached Tiger Eye for a collaborative effort at putting out an investigative piece. That was when Wild Ghana came up. It was primarily to tell the natural behavioral pattern of Ghanaians as a people. Of the many stories that were mooted, one became the center of attention, Saga of the Abortion Doctor. In Wild Ghana, there were stories of daytime prostitution, blatant bribery by security personnel and city guards, the sale and use of illegal drugs, sale of land in prime areas of town, and the sale of abortion pills. Then came the abortion doctor, reputed to have conducted thousands of abortions, and as if that was not enough, having sex with the young ladies who came for the abortion. With the assistance of police CID, the sexy doctor was picked up. He turned out to be a medical assistant by training. His actions led to a national debate on abortion and related issues. How to Rob Africa was staged in the Seychelles, during which time Anas teamed up with fellow Zimbabwean journalist Stanley Kwenda to expose the way African businessmen ended up channeling public funds into offshore accounts under disguise. This was a project done for Al Jazeera's People in Power program, as was High Next worked stage in the north of Ghana. Still very early in 2013, Anas did another cross-border investigation in Ghana and neighboring Burkina Faso. It had to do with an age-old tradition that allowed children believed to be evil to be killed. Reminiscent of Spell of the Albino, Anas managed to tell a story that started from getting a medicine man to assess and declare a child as a spirit child, going further to confront them with a prosthetic baby, this time around when they agreed to kill the child. The men had arrived. Their concoction was boiling, and they were ready to administer the potion. But the police were also very ready to play their part by way of arrest and further prosecution, given that several attempts at advocacy had failed. The police and policy makers all had views on this outdated practice. 2 documentary films in January 2013 and the investigative team with direction from Anas were raring to go with several other investigative pieces in the national interest and in the advancement of human rights and minimizing of corruption. The name Anas in all of this is being mentioned by several people across the social divide in different contexts. The journey has been far and long, rough at times and fair on other days, yet the relentlessness and zeal of social justice leaves the man and his team with no option than to soldier on. He has also had his fair share of criticisms.
I'm not sad, neither am I the jubilant happy person, because my lenses go much further than many other people. The key issues are that there's still a lot to be done. In doing it, there will be problems. You will get enemies. People would insult you. People will take you on in court. People would try to kill you. People would try to just come to ensure that you don't do your work. Some will try to bribe you. They will spread rumors. It's just a hazard of this profession. Once you get in, you should be prepared to take the bullets as when they come. As the bullets come, you have to keep your focus, and that's what I've done over the years. When I get into any story, I know exactly what I am looking for. And I get myself also prepared for the controversies that come alongside with these stories. those who want to see my face, I would just urge them to do one thing for me. They should all put their hands on deck. Let us all push the national agenda at making Ghana a better place. Let us all fight together to ensure that we clean our society of the evil ones and the corrupt ones. When society is properly cleaned, then I'll be very confident to open up my face for everybody to see.
Now a trained lawyer and a member of the Ghana Bar Association, the world can only await what Anas has for the life ahead.
France,